Hey everybody, welcome to Module 3. Here we are. Happy February, happy Valentine's Day if you're so inclined to celebrate. Um, so yeah, last week we focused a little bit on argument, or the last week and the week before, on argument and how arguments are mapped out. You revised your article map, or you started putting that together after your proposal, and you're mapping out the argument of the article that you selected or whatever you chose. And hopefully you submitted that draft yesterday. If you haven't, make sure you do that, because this week what we're doing is we're going to work through a couple of major things. You'll do a peer review of this article map that you've been working on, and then you'll have a chance to revise it and then submit the very final draft of this by the end of this module. So not um, this weekend, but the next. And so these are some of the major things that we're thinking about. We want to think about how our writing appears for others. How do we engage audiences? How do we get people on our side? And there are some readings that go with this week. We're actually, rather than just reading texts, we have a couple of podcast episodes that I'd like you to listen to, because I want you to think about how audience is working within these. Um, these are things I just like you to listen to and think about. So, for example, Serial Episode 1, I'd like you to listen to that. And that's going to help you complete our discussion board number 5, um, that asks you to really think about first audience and this idea of cultural narratives. Um, and I want you to think about some ideas that are present in these podcasts. How are cultural narratives steering the audience? What does Sarah Koenig want an audience to believe about this character's guilt or innocence? There's a murder that takes place, and this is sort of a true crime story of how a person is charged with this murder. And I want you to think about how the narrator of this podcast really wants us to think about um, this character Adnan's guilt or his innocence. This refers to some slides here about cultural narratives. You can find them here. And I wanted just to talk about these. This is the idea. A cultural narrative is just a story that people tell about, their own values, their past, their present. We have cultural narratives um, that are part of our region. There are, for example, like cultural narratives inherent to Kentucky, just as there are cultural narratives inherent to a nation, for example. If you're from a place that isn't the United States, you have a different set of cultural narratives, for example, than those who are from the United States. And so it's a story we tell about things. But they also rely on this idea of a discourse community. So groups within groups. If you think about a discourse community as just a group of people who share values, similar experiences, or cultures. And to give you some examples here, um, think about if you are part of a sports team. That's a discourse community. Discourse is just a way of communicating. And so on a sports team, you have a very particular way of communicating with one another, that's maybe very, very unique to that team, that somebody else, somebody like me, wouldn't understand if I don't play your sport. I don't know what it's like. The same is true as a part of like religious groups or just other kinds of groups we form. We are part of lots and lots of different discourse communities. Think about how you might communicate with one group of people with whom you're friends in a way that is very different from the way you communicate with other people. Um, Academia, participating um, in communicating with people on a college campus. That's a discourse community. The kinds of things we do, the ways we communicate is very different from the ways we communicate with others. Think about how you text a friend versus how you message a professor through email. It's a different discourse community. So we're members of lots and lots of discourse communities, and there are lots of cultural narratives that surround us that we're part of, whether they're political or religious or or anything else that kind of shape the way we see the world. Um, Sometimes this causes trouble because discourse communities, if you're on a sports team, you have a shared culture of that sports team, a shared way of being, of conducting yourselves. But not all cultures have the same discourse community. Sometimes we see things very differently from others within a culture. And think about how this causes trouble. I want you to think about how this causes trouble in that podcast, for example. Where are there some cultural differences that are um, causing trouble in ways people communicate or in ways people understand one another? And so the major characters are going to be Adnan, Hay, and Jay that we hear about so far. I want you to think about what kinds of cultural narratives are present in the way these characters are introduced to us. How does the narrator, Sarah Koenig, um, how does she present each of them, and how does she capture their cultural narratives? So that's what I want you to think about for our first discussion board. The second one will be about episode 2 of Serial, and so you can think about those issues related there. The other two main things we're doing, though, this module, is you're submitting a peer review and conducting a peer review of a couple of your peers. So here's the thing, here's the way this works. You're going to submit a full draft of your article map for peer review by the end of the day on Wednesday, the 15th of this week. That can be the draft you just submitted. It's just a draft of this article or this article map. And then you're going to complete your peer review of two other peers by Sunday, by the end of the day on Sunday. Here's the way I'm thinking about feedback. I want you to go and read that rubric. Think about the requirements of this assignment, the instructions you've been given, and you're going to identify some strengths of your peer's piece. What are things it does particularly well? And I want you to be specific about that. And you're going to look for some growth areas. What are some things that the piece could do to improve? What could your peer do to make this even better? The acronym I use for peer feedback that I want you to kind of use to kind of guide you through this is SPARK. And it's a quick way of thinking about how you want your feedback to be specific. You don't just want to say, it's good, or paragraph 3 is bad. That doesn't help anybody. That's too vague. You want it to be specific. You want it to be linked to a sentence or a section or a word. You want it to be prescriptive. You want to offer people a way of making this better. You want to make sure it's offers a solution. Rather than just saying paragraph 3 is bad, maybe you talk about how paragraph 3 is unclear to me as a reader because maybe it lacks organization, and you could reorganize this paragraph to make it more clear. That's a prescriptive idea. And at the same time, that's also actionable. It's something that the writer can say, oh, yeah, maybe I do have some organization issues in that paragraph. I got a lot of stuff going on, and I can see how a reader would read this and not be quite sure what this is about. And then, of course, you want this to be referenced to the thing that we're doing. So we have some specific um, tasks that we're working on, and you want to make sure you reference that. And then finally, the most important thing I think is we want to be kind. We're reading one another's work. We want to be helpful, but we want to frame this in kind ways, in helpful ways. And so that's part of this too. We want to make sure we're thinking about that. So you'll submit your draft for a peer review by the end of the day on Wednesday, and then offer some feedback to two other people, and it'll set it up for you here in Blackboard. When everybody submits, you'll see them available to you. Submit that feedback by the end of the day on Sunday. And so once you have that feedback, then you can think about what do you need to do to improve your article map, because you're going to turn in that final draft by the end of the day on Sunday at the end of this module. So that's module 3. And then this is our final draft of that article map. So once you have that feedback, you'll be able to think through that and think about what can you do to improve this, what can you do to sort of revise it. And this is also your last chance to really come to me. Email me, I can set up a Google Meet if you want help with it in that way. I'm happy to give you some feedback on it, whatever it might be. But let me know what I can do to help. All right. Sorry, guys, that was kind of long, but I know that's a lot going on, and we have some new things that we're looking at here. So I wanted to talk through all those things. Please reach out. Let me know what I can do to help you. Looking forward to seeing what you all have to say about these podcast episodes. I think it's really interesting. Think about that idea of audience all the way through this. How are you tailoring your essay to an audience? How are you making sure your readership can really get at this? And how do we think about audience more generally? All right, guys. Reach out with any questions. Till next time. Talk to you later.